ministers is to empower the ambassadors.
The only thing that you really push forth is the truth.
You don't see many women represented when it comes to the decisions as to how to handle.
Hello, and thank you for watching Politico's AI and Tech Summit. I'm Clothilde Goujard, a tech reporter here at Politico, where I've been covering for the past year the DSA, the Digital Services Act, the EU's content bill. And today, as we're speaking, we're just the day before what could be the last trilogue, the high-level political meeting between the EU institutions. And so this is a very timely discussion. We have some interesting guests with us today. I'll start with Peter Oczko, who's the Deputy Minister of Industry and Trade for the Czech Republic, who's joining us virtually here. A PhD in Information Economics, Peter has worked in the Czech public administration as an advisor to the Deputy Ministry of Finance and as a chairman for the Czech Technology Agency. He's also worked in the private sector with Telefonica and was appointed to his current job in 2018. We also have Alexandre Alaphilippe, who's the executive director and co-founder of the EU DisinfoLab. He has coordinated work on some really large investigations into information operations linked to Russia, India, and China. And he also works here in Brussels and in Washington, DC on platform regulation and hybrid threats. So thank you for joining us today. Before we begin, a quick reminder, you can submit questions on the Swapcard app in the questions box next to the live stream. You can also tweet about the panel and the summit in general with the hashtag #PoliticoAI. So for those who haven't followed the DSA, this is one of Brussels' most exciting files. It was proposed by the Commission in December 2020, and it's gone really fast. The idea is to better tackle illegal content online, and also just set some rules for especially some of the biggest platforms, what we call the very large online platforms, as to how they should go about regulating disinformation and other problems that we can see online. Peter, the Czech Republic supported the Council general approach, but your country also insisted that the DSA had to ensure that startups were not overly burdened and that the bill didn't restrict innovation. Have you been satisfied with the negotiations led by the French presidency of the Council?
Yeah, first of all, thank you very much for the invitation, and greetings to all the audience of this event, and thank you for choosing this very topical topic. And as I said, we are actually really waiting for tomorrow's trilogue, and hoping that it will be the end of a long but hopefully successful journey. To your question. Actually, yes, Czech Republic was actually generally whole the time supporting upgrade of the e-commerce directive. That is actually the basis for preparation of Digital Services Act, and we were actually welcoming the steps to actually increase the harmonization of rules for digital services in the EU, and also bringing more certainty, more legal certainty to businesses in many areas of digital services. But of course, one of the most important was exactly illegal content. I'm saying that just because actually we need to actually understand, and everybody probably understands that DSA is not the act just to prohibit illegal content, but it's also about that. The primary origins of DSA are in the e-commerce directive. So what we were actually saying is that we understand that we need to bring more harmonization. We need really to actually bring the principle what is illegal offline has to be illegal online, but we should do it in a way that will not bring too much excessive administrative burden, especially for the small companies. So in the end, we are actually quite successful. We were very successful with the general approach. We think it was very good compromise, actually, the small companies are actually in a good position there, and on the other hand, we have reached the goals to actually address the problems that are actually connected with the larger platforms. So, to your question, we are quite satisfied. We actually also think that the trials could end up with a good result. So for the Czech Republic, I think this is really good result.
Thanks. Alexandre, as we said, the DSA at first was primarily supposed to tackle illegal content, even though there was a part for very large platforms. And then we also had the war that started in Ukraine with Russia invading the country, and the ensuing disinformation campaign that brought more attentions at least to how the likes of Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter were moderating harmful content on their platforms. And so the Commission was asked by the Council and the Parliament to present new ideas to better address these kind of urgent situations during major crises, and propose this new crisis protocol mechanism that just came out very recently during trilogue. So it wasn't in any of the institutions' positions, but suddenly ended up during these trilogues behind closed doors. What do you think of this idea?
Thank you for the invitation. Thank you, Clothilde. I think when you look at disinformation, we need to also think like we have a war in Ukraine right now. We also had a pandemic 2 years ago. It seems like far away, but like a wave of disinformation about the pandemic, wave of disinformation about vaccination, and now we have a new wave of disinformation with the war. So first, I think what the DSA provides is it provides a good framework, and we would like to welcome the effort of the Commission to have put such a comprehensive text with so much fastness into discussing it and negotiating it, and now we seem to have a toolbox which is very interesting. It opens a new era. It's the end of the privileges of the few and the accountability for all. So right now with the DSA, we will have more accountability to understand what are the content moderation principles, what are the content moderation decisions taken by platforms. So this is a huge step forward for the community countering disinformation. So when we look at this and we look at the tools that are seen, especially in the Article 17, the user redress mechanism, to have the capacity for people to flag disinformation, but also have answers about the platforms on why they took such a decision and to challenge these decisions. This is providing more accountability for the platforms. We are always worried and concerned about the 11th hour proposals. Earlier in the text, we also had a very concerning proposal about media exemption. So it's always complicated to have this kind of new things being put at the end of a process when we don't know exactly what will be the safeguards in terms of human rights, in terms of when will be stopped, how it will be triggered. So what we think is like what inside the DSA as a core text is already providing more accountability for the platforms. The question right now is that we don't need especially like more crisis protocols and more things. We need to make sure already that the tools that we have in the DSA will be activable by the civil society, by trusted flaggers, by users of the platforms. And that's where the core battle is right now. And we are very concerned about 11th hour proposals that have no safeguards on human rights.
So are you saying this new idea, this new protocol is useless?
It's not useless as long as you already have accountability and the capacity to have to request specific measures from the platforms in the DSA. It's already very interesting. What we are concerned is like what we had in the COVID-19 pandemic, when you had such crisis protocols being activated. What does it bring? More transparency reports for the platforms that actually most of civil society cannot analyze, because that's too much paper to analyze. That's too much data to look at. What we need is accountability. We need to understand how these platforms are doing it. So maybe a crisis protocol will help, but already what we have in the DSA will also help to have more accountability of the platforms.
And what do you think? You're talking about 11th hour proposal. Have you seen the proposal? What do you think of this, that it was presented behind closed doors? Have you seen the text, what it looks like?
Personally, I didn't see the text. I see all the discussions about it in the community. But it's always challenging when we have these kind of discussions that were not here before, because the text of the Commission and the text that has been negotiated was very balanced. So touching such core things at the end of a negotiations is always very tricky and very dangerous. So I'm very concerned about that and about the capacity to have a clear limitation of when does it start, when does it stop, who triggers it, and do we have a fundamental rights check. It's about making sure that crisis does not become permanent and to make sure that we can end these crisis protocols and have like safeguards.
Peter, according to the text that we saw, because they were leaked to us, the council made some changes to the Commission's proposal and then approved it yesterday during a so-called COREPER meeting with deputy ambassadors. So I assume the council, including your country, approved this new edition that wasn't in anyone's text. Is that right?
Yeah, this is actually a very direct question. Yeah, so if so the question is if we have actually approved the version that was actually negotiated before, or yesterday.
Yeah. So you're good with this idea.
Yeah, actually, yes. So our COREPER representatives have approved that. So yeah, that's the simple answer is yes.
Right. Do you think, according to you, is the DSA doing enough to? Will it be enough to tackle disinformation online?
Yeah, actually, yes. Actually, I think that there are not so many surprises already in the compromise text. So I think I agree very much with what was said by Alexander. The proposed text is very balanced already now, and brings a lot of measures that can actually target the disinformation, especially at the level of very large online platforms. And we are very happy that we see a lot of mechanisms that are already incorporated in the proposal. Especially, I like that there's a big step forward in the area of transparency. So the removal decisions have to be accompanied always with comments on why it was or explanation why it was removed. But there is also a step forward in the area of public transparency, because the providers will have to publish annual reports on content moderation, and also the very large online platforms will have to publish assessment on the systemic risks. And of course, another step forward is necessity of establishing the internal complaint handling system. This is clear step that can definitely help. And the last but not least, out of court dispute settlement is another mechanism that is. That can help to efficiently manage the fight with disinformation. So there's a set of concrete measures in DSA as it was already proposed within the general approach, and I don't see anything that would actually shake it during the trilogues. So I really think that DSA will be efficient to fight disinformation.
All right. And as for you, you've done large investigations before. How will the DSA have a clear impact? Can you walk us through the sort of things that it will change for your job to fight and to detect disinformation online?
I'm not sure it will change a lot about the detection of disinformation. I think the question of the work of fact checkers, of journalists on finding disinformation network might not change a lot. I think maybe on part of the data access, I think maybe more researchers might have access to more data. I think it's very good to have access to this data, but the key issue is not how much data you have, how much data is released by the platforms, how much annual reports are being given by the platforms, or how they are managing the risk. What is important is what does that mean in accountability? So if we have the capacity in the way we receive data to actually show where is the accountability, what are, if the platform forbids COVID-19 disinformation and it's still there, why is it still there? And to understand what are the reasons and to challenge these decisions. So I think what the DSA, to put an image on this, as a disinformation researcher, very often you are notifying about disinformation occurrences on network. And very often the issue is that you send an email or you send a notification to a platform, and it seems that you have two things that are coming back to you. One is a type of out-of-office response email. So we're looking at this, we're fighting disinformation, everything is fine, we'll look at it, don't worry. And the other thing that is blocked, it seems, in the platforms was the reply button. The reply button seems to be blocked. You don't have responses to your email. I think the DSA will change that, and the Article 17 will change that. They will be forced to be responded. They will be forced to actually explain, have statement of reasons to explain why they did take decision or why they did not take decision. Very often, in the network that we flagged, the assets that we've been showing are infringing the terms and conditions, are clear disinformation, sometimes from Russia. And I can see about not Russian disinformation has been labeled on Facebook. We showed how some assets that we've showed are still not labeled as Russian disinformation on Facebook. We've seen how assets are also still not labeled as Russian disinformation on Twitter. We've seen how vaccine disinformation is still not labeled or removed from YouTube. So the question now will be that thanks to the DSA, we have the capacity not to act, but it will work only if all the community countering disinformation is getting empowered in these tools and use them. It's not how much beautiful the toolbox is. If you don't open it to change your wheel or to fix your frame, that doesn't work. You need to open it, you need to use it, and you need to understand how it will have impact. Right now, we have asymmetry, which means that countering disinformation is very expensive, like putting researchers that are publishing papers that then are getting harassed, then your organization is getting sued, and on the other side, nothing happens. So the guys might have their page blocked for 1 month, and then they come back and they're still making money out of disinformation. So DSA is like putting a bit things even, more symmetry and more sanctions and more accountability on understanding why the digital infrastructure that we have right now can enable that and how we can have accountability on both the actors and the distribution system.
Peter, how important was it for the council to force large social media to be more accountable as to the sort of content moderation decisions they take on their platforms?
So actually, yeah, I think that there was of course, initially difficult debate, and it was not easy to find the original consensus. But what I think actually helped, even though it's not something we would be happy for, is actually the COVID crisis that's shown that disinformation can really very negatively impact the solutions for very dramatic moments in European economic and social life. The disinformation related to COVID was quite spread at some moments. And I think this was one of the things that actually helped to find the consensus faster. I remember many debates. I remember many debates with the platforms on many levels. I know that there were some some complaints, and there was of course some lobbying against some of the measures. But in the end, actually, everybody agreed that it's good to have a more clear set of rules that will actually increase the clarity of the legal situation in this area, and actually will better address the issues of accountability and processes that are connected with the actions that have to be taken. Actually, in the beginning, the debates were quite difficult, but I was quite surprised, and we have to thank the Slovenian presidency and also the French presidency that were quite pushy on finding the compromise. Especially, I think Slovenian presidency did a great job to find a consensus on the general approach. But of course, the French presidency does a great job in trilogues. And it was quite smooth in the end. By the end of last year or before the general approach was reached, I heard that the negotiation could take a month. But then suddenly the compromise was there. So many thanks and appreciation to the Slovenian and the French presidency for being so pushy and finding the right compromise. And as I said, in my opinion, actually the COVID crisis helped to find the solution faster.
It is true that the negotiations have gone very fast. Yet it's interesting because the text, when it will be applied, it's another thing, right? Like when social media companies and regular citizens will see it actually have an impact on their daily lives, it could take much longer, especially because the council wants it to apply 18 months, a year and a half after its entry into force. In contrast, the Commission wants it to apply 3 months after its entry into force. So, I mean, it sounds great that it's gone so fast with the negotiations, but why does it want to have more time for it to apply?
So there's still debates on from when DSA will be applied. You are right that there are these two proposals, 12 months and 18 months. I think the 18 months are coming from the actually necessity that we have to find the right implementation mechanisms of such a complex legal change as DSA is. So with DSA we actually will establish the new position of digital services coordinators. We also most likely will actually establish a new competence of European Commission that has to be somehow made actually brought to the reality and start to work, and it will need some discussions in order to make it work properly. I can understand that the push for 12 months. We will see what will be the final decision. On the other hand, we also see that also with the Ukraine crisis, also with the push of the Commission and of course also EU as such and member states as such, that actually the large platforms have taken a lot of measures in the area of disinformation. Actually, the acceleration of actual implementation of measures to fight the disinformation was something that we did not expect, and it was also thanks to push from the EU institutions. Personally, I was present at the debate with the large platforms in Paris, organized by the French presidency. It was very interesting debate. We saw actually on the place how the mindset of the platforms is changing. So by that, I want to say that one thing is the proper implementation, and that's why I understand the 18 months. The other thing is that we definitely have to speak to large platforms and to push them to actually work with this information already now, and it's happening already now. But to underestimate the implementation usually brings some problems in the implementation, and in the worst case, it could compromise whole the legal act. So we will see what will be the final decision. But if it's 12 months, let's intensively work on the governance and very well organized implementation mechanisms.
Alexandre, what's the urgency to have the DSA start to apply?
As soon as possible. Disinformation is spreading at a fast pace. So the question is, how much time will we have until we have all the DSA being enforced, including access to data, transparency, but also all the new mechanisms and the new rights that are granted to users. I think we can only measure the success of the DSA, but what will be achieved with the DSA. If the DSA is implemented fastly and we have only piling up communications, battle of press release about risk assessments, so annual reports with, we can anticipate, as Joe McNamee says, like we can always anticipate the press release before an annual report's being set. So basically the platforms will say, much has been done, and the Commission say, yes, but more to be done. So we need to get away from this battle of communications. We need to get away from that measures being announced, never been checked, never been see if they are enforced or not. So that's where the DSA plays a part, and that's where we need to have it as soon as possible being implemented to actually check what's being done. The urgency is there. It's not about discussing about how much the API can do that. Yes, it's important, but what we need to do is have access to these new rights, and that's the only way we can do that. If it's only piling up transparency reports, we've seen that in the past in the COVID-19. I can tell you, it took 3 months to our researcher to actually know what was happening in the 27 EU countries, just comparing PDFs of platforms. That's not what we want to have. We are past that step. So let's have a DSA that works, and that works as soon as possible.
Are you referring to something specifically when you talk about these actions and the PDFs from the Commission on
yeah, it's a study we made. So we compiled all the transparency report about how much accounts have been closed by a platform. So one is saying 1,000, the other one is saying 2,000, the other one is 3,000. What does it mean? It's numbers. It's numbers. It's completely empty. The question is how is it applied? How, if I do see a network of disinformation, if I see what Facebook calls coordinated inauthentic behavior, which is spreading disinformation online, why, if it's flagged, it's still here? What is the reason behind it? If you forbid it, why is the reason that it's still here? If you do not, why did you keep here after the flag? So this is what we need to have. That's the most crucial part into countering disinformation. It's only for piling up PDF and XLS files. I'm not sure it's important to understand the phenomena, but I'm not sure it will help the accountability. Transparency for the sake of transparency doesn't enforce accountability. It's only one step to accountability.
So are you saying the Council's 18 months of application would be too long for you?
Yeah, it was I heard provision about 1 year for the delegated act. I think that's completely reasonable, and we should go into something that is as quick as possible.
And when you say that, what would be the ideal time?
They are always wishful thinking and technical implementation. So I will, as I'm not in the trilogue room, I would not get into the nitty-gritty of how much time does it need to do. What is sure is like what we need as a community concerning this information is we need to add. We can't wait 3 years or to wait. Actually, 18 months is not far for the next European elections. Do we want to have a DSA that works for the next European elections or not?
That's a good point. What do you think, Peter?
So I just can add that what the Council proposes is that the implementation should be up to 18 months. It can be faster. I definitely agree that it would be good to have the rules in place as soon as possible. Of course, the elections are of course an argument, but let's work together on the implementation mechanisms. And I also would like to say that, again, we should speak to the platforms on a regular basis and push them to actually apply some of the requirements even before the application date. And some of these platforms are already doing that. It's what I was saying. Actually, it's not impossible. But on the other hand, we have to set the implementation mechanisms in the member states and in the Commission. So let's do it well, and also let's try to do it as soon as possible. That's everything I can add to this.
My last question for you would be, what do you expect from the trilogues tomorrow?
Actually, I hope for white smoke, coming from the Council Commission chimney, and actually, I do not expect major changes. Actually, what we saw when we saw the proposals from the Parliament, there are some discussions on a few articles, but I expect the compromise to be reached tomorrow, and I bet that we will not be very much surprised.
Are there some specific articles or compromises from Parliament that worry you?
Actually, I wouldn't say worry. I think what the position of the Parliament that was the input for the trilogues was very reasonable, and I wouldn't say that it would worry us. Of course, there are some discussions on actually targeted advertising, where actually, of course, we also think that the proposal of Parliament was going the right way, but we need to find the right balance and the proportionality in order to actually to make these measures possible. So for example, the targeted or personalized advertisement is one of the last debates. But again, I say this is not something that would actually completely where we would be completely scared. We just say that we hope that also the possibilities of implementation of such measures will be taken into account, and the right balance will be and the trials will strike the right balance.
Thank you. Alexandre, do you have any hopes for tomorrow?
I hope we can start thinking about when to use the DSA. We are always concerned by these last mile. We've seen in the DMA at the last evening, some things are coming up, bargain negotiations in closed doors. So of course, and we've seen that in the DSA, in the Parliament, in the plenary. So of course, we'll be watching that. No last minute, 11th almost 12-hour media exemption or sector exemption or new privileges being accorded to certain types of stakeholders will be inserted. So I think all civil society organizations controlling this information have a close eye on this last mile, and I hope that from tomorrow we can discuss about when will the DSA be in application, and to start thinking about when we can have more accountability of the platforms. I think that's what we all wish for.
Thank you. We've reached the end of our panel. Thank you to our panelists today, Peter Ochko, joining us virtually, and Alexandre Alaphilippe. Please stay seated and stay online for our next session, a digital bridge discussion with my colleague, Mark Scott. Thank you.